Hello, I'd like to welcome everyone to our webinar, Relationships Are the Spice of Life, or Are They? And my name is Dr. Patricia Crane. I'm your host today, and also our panelists who are phenomenal and around the world. I'm going to introduce them just by name and where they're from. And first of all, Sandra Filer, who is from Bradenton, Florida. She is our teacher trainer for the US, and we're thrilled to have her on the call. We also have Shirley Serbony. She's from the beautiful island of St. Maarten in the Caribbean, where it's nice and warm there. And we have Anna Milkic, who trained with us in the US and is assisted. She is now in Serbia. She is from Serbia and back there now with her young daughter, which is wonderful. Vanessa Montes, who's from Tampa, Florida. She's also been assisting in the trainings. We have Christy Dickson, who's our fabulous admin, who is from Temecula, California. And we have Catherine Dietz, who is from San Diego, California. So we welcome them, and we'll ask you to go ahead and put on the chat, where are you from? Okay, just put on the chat your name, it comes up, and then where are you from? See who we've got around the world here. Okay. Christy, you want to go ahead and read some of those for us?
So we have Georgina from Mexico, and we have Heba from San Diego, and Mary from Spain.
Wow.
Jonice from Albuquerque, New Mexico. Colleen Doyle from the UK, and Sheila from Varsha, India.
Wow.
Yeah, and Mita from India, Kathleen from Ireland, Shannon from Oregon, Emanuela from Cyprus, Isabel from Portugal, Sinatra from Canada, from BC, Canada, Mary from Waterford, Ireland, and Susan from Kentucky.
Wow. Well, we'll have more coming on, I know, but that's wonderful. People from around the world. So thank you. And we're so excited that you're all here with us today to learn more about relationships and how you can transform them. So I just want to start out and say that, we know that the foundation of Louise Hay's work is loving and approving of yourself. And that when we love and approve of ourselves, of course, it's easier to love and approve of others. And yet those ideas are easy in here. They're not always so easy in here, are they? And so it takes some work, and some of Louise's techniques. We use affirmations, inner child work, releasing old emotions, and forgiveness. And so all those things come into play with our relationships and even other aspects of our lives. So many of us have to unlearn our beliefs from childhood, right? And our panelists today are going to share some of those things that they unlearned and how they transformed their lives. I'd like to do a little reading from Louise's book, Meditations to Heal Your Life. And this is one of my favorites. I just go to this one a lot. And if you don't have it, I would absolutely encourage you to get it because it is beautiful. And the one I'm going to share with you today is about acceptance. So you might want to take a deep breath and close your eyes. You can do so safely wherever you are, and just listen to the words and take them into your heart and your mind. I radiate acceptance. If I want to be accepted as I am, then I need to be willing to accept others as they are. We always want our parents to accept us totally, and yet we are not always willing to accept them as they are. Acceptance is giving ourselves and others the ability to just be. We can only set standards for ourselves and not others, but even then, we want them to be more like guidelines than standards. The more we practice self-acceptance, the easier it is to drop habits that no longer serve us. It is easier to grow and change in an atmosphere of love. And so it is. You can take a deep breath and open your eyes. And of course, one of the things that Louise says first is to stop all criticism. And it certainly is easier to grow in an atmosphere of love. So I'm going to start out and ask our trainer from the US, Sandra Filer, if she would talk about how things in relationships were just sort of broadly before she found Louise's work, and then what changed when she started practicing Louise's philosophy. So Sandra, over to you.
Thank you, Patricia.
Yeah.
So when I think about key relationships in my life, the one that really stands out most significantly is my relationship to men. And before Louise, I actually was going through a second divorce and found myself feeling less than, feeling not good enough. I wasn't all of these things, right? And that's when I discovered Louise's book, because all I wanted to do was be happy. After diving into her teachings and learning more about her philosophies, what I realized was that I was living out my mother's belief that men could not be trusted. Mm-hmm. And it was only through the personal growth work, using all of Louise's techniques, going through her book chapter by chapter, attending the training, that I discovered I had this awareness. Oh my gosh, this is something I heard over and over and over and over, replayed in my head. Men are cheaters, mm-hmm. Men are cheaters. And it became an unconscious belief of mine. And it was only until I made aware of that I was able to change that by, first of all, working on myself, right, to love and accept myself, and then to also begin to learn to trust once again.
Yeah.
And so,
right.
Yeah.
Well, and I also want to share that the reason that you are a teacher trainer in the U.S. is because you did immerse yourself in Louise's work. You started training with us back in 2006. You did every training that we did, and then began assisting. And that's just something to point out to everybody. You know, people read Louise's book and it's great, and they feel transformed for a little bit, but you really have to immerse yourself in the work. And I also just want to say that Sandra is definitely the one that reminds us to play with our inner child. Yes, the pigtails here. Oh my gosh. Okay. Now I'm going to go to Catherine Dietz from San Diego and just say that Louise's work helped her to really see patterns in relationships. And her focus and her specialty has actually become with women and helping them in terms of their relationships. And her company is called A Healthy Path to Love. And she also believes that relationships are really what help us grow, and they certainly do. They give us all that fodder, don't they, to deal with in our own lives. So, Catherine, I'm going to go to you and talk a little bit again about your background and then how you came to be focused on women and helping them with relationships.
Yes, thank you. So much like Sandra, I had kind of had unhealthy relationships before I became aware of Louise's work. I was actually in a 13-year relationship, married part of that time, very unhealthy from the beginning, but I just didn't know. I had these patterns that I wasn't even aware of. The biggest thing about Louise's work was these patterns, where does this come from? Where am I operating from? So after I moved out of that relationship and started working on myself, everything shifted. And I really, really learned that in order for other people to respect me, I need to respect myself. In order for other people to be honest with me, I need to be honest with myself. And getting in touch with my feelings. I hadn't really been aware of how to get in touch with my feelings. So this work really taught me how to do that in a huge way. And then later on, I had a second long-term relationship that ended up being this kind of should I stay or should I go situation, although much healthier. It wasn't the life partner that I knew I was aligned with. And so as difficult as it was, I had to get back in touch with what my soul was telling me, what my feelings were telling me. And I was able to come to a decision that felt right with my soul. And so that's what I help women with now, because it becomes very confusing and painful and hard to navigate all the emotions in that should I stay or should I go situation. So helping them get back into the truth of who they are and what for them, and then being able to express it in a healthy way.
Yeah. And you're absolutely right. Really getting in touch with who you are and your values. That's so important to make those big decisions. So that's great. Thank you. Thanks, Catherine. And Vanessa from Tampa, Florida. Okay. She has more love, more financial freedom, peace of mind, and happiness in her heart after Louise's work, and really excited to teach others about these philosophies and how to change their lives. And Vanessa, what was one really idea that was so important for you in changing the relationships in your life?
So when I read everyone is doing the best that they can with the knowledge and awareness that they have at that moment, it shifted all of my relationships because I knew he wasn't intentionally hurting me, and my mom didn't intentionally mean to be that way, and my dad didn't want to be, unattached. They simply were handing down to me what was given to them, and someone can't give you something that they were never given, that they were never shown.
Right.
And it gave me a level of compassion for people that I hadn't had before I was in victim state of mind, like, oh, he did this and she did that, and my life was drama. I was quick to snap and be confrontational and always an argument, always a problem. And now when people say things and do things, I know if I'm being triggered, it's something within me that I have to work on. And if I'm not being triggered and they're being nasty, it's something that they're going through, and I don't take it personal. It just, it falls right off my shoulder and I keep moving forward. So it definitely took me out of that victim mentality, and it empowered me. And, I have more control over my emotions, and I can feel them and not vomit them all over everyone else.
That's a good word. Yeah. Okay. We are getting some questions and we will get to those. Okay. I want to do a first round with our panelists here for them to share some of their revelations, and then we will definitely get to your questions. So Shirley, I'm going to go to you next. And Shirley found Louise's work 15 years ago and did some workshops with some of our workshop leaders, and then came to the training. Again, she lives in St. Maarten and is very thrilled about sharing the work with people in her community, loves affirmations and mirror work and all the techniques. So Shirley, share with us about, again, some of your background before Louise's work and how it shifted once you found the philosophy.
So, like you mentioned, thank you, Patricia. 15 years ago, it all started for me because I came to the realization that I was walking around with a lot of resentment. I always felt heard, unheard, and there's a lot of turmoil. And when I look back at that moment in time, it was like, why is my relationships are not working out? Relationship with my mother, relationship with my sister, relationship with my significant other. Why is it not working out? And first thing I did was therapy, and that didn't really work because they said we want to dig, but I already know the problem. It's not working, right? So it's only until I attended one workshop and one of the participants mentioned about heal your life. And I'm like, okay, I got the book. I looked at it, didn't do much with it. And then I was going through my first divorce. And then I picked up that book. And then from there on, started to work. And it touched layers in me that I never discovered when I was going through normal therapy. And so doing the work, the affirmation, forgiveness, inner child, the healing, the releasing, everything started changing. And like you mentioned before, you constantly have to do the work because it's not doing it for, I read the book and I've done it. But no, it's a constant thing because someone else will come on your path and then they come with their baggage as well. And how am I dealing? It's like an onion, and every time you're peeling another layer until you understand, okay, what's going on with me? And like Vanessa keeps saying, all right, is it me or is it with them? Is it my what is going on with my inner child? And more as I get to understand myself better, loving myself, accepting of myself, a lot of my relationships starts to flourish. And the people who didn't belong in my circle were no longer there. So, which was also a blessing as well.
Yeah, that's true. Some of them just drift away, and then new ones come into your life that are more in alignment with what you are, and where you are at the time. Okay. All right. Anna, just a little background on Anna. She's also assisted at trainings in the US, and she learned to accept herself more fully and rejoice in love, compassion, and trust, and get fully in touch with her inner self. And she really learned that no matter where you grew up, what was going on, you can be what you were meant to be. So Anna, please share now.
Yeah, thank you, Patricia, so much for reminding me. I haven't read those words recently, and now it just suits me so well. So yeah, for me, big thing was before knowing about the Louise's Hay philosophy, I was not able to express myself. I had blocks, emotional blocks, that I wouldn't talk, I wouldn't say what's right or what's not right, and with emotions as well. So I would go inwards, I would cry, I would hide from people. And this goes back to from my starting with my family, with my mom and my sister. And then once I got married, I knew I was in trouble because that behavior just continued, and I was not happy. I wouldn't be able to say what's wrong, and then I would feel not cared for, not loved, not supported. And that was about a time when I actually discovered Louise Hay, and I read a book. And there's a beautiful You Can Heal Your Life companion book with a lot of exercises. And the one that was really important for me was the whole concept of deserving, which Louise calls deservability. And I remember it was the question in the exercise, what do you want that you don't have right now? And I was like, ooh, let me tell you this, and to be loved and to be supported. And I want my husband to do this and do that. And I would just project that all the other people need to do stuff for me. And then I read the next question. It was, what did you learn about deserving in your childhood? And that's when it hit me. I was like, oh, okay, so this is deeper than just what's going on right now. So once I learned to love myself fully, to support myself, to take care of myself, and that I can have all of that without doing anything in return, that I just deserve because I exist, that completely changed my whole life and all of my experiences, because I was no longer looking for people to provide it for me. I was providing it for myself. And then I had different experiences and different relationships, of course.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Okay. Christy, and Christy again is our fabulous admin. We depend on her so very much. And when we actually hired her, she really wasn't that familiar with Louise's work, but we hired her because we liked her energy so much, and she had great references. And of course, over the years now, she has immersed herself in Louise's work, assists us at the training, and she has also trained as the workshop leader and coach with us as well. So Christy.
Well, I was so lucky to just kind of fall into this, and it came at such a great time in my life when I was really starting my young family, and relationships were so important, and I didn't have as much time to notice why I was responding the way I did to relationships. And when I got into this, I started to realize that my responses were not in response to other people's behavior, but that they were my ego responding to what other people were doing. And for me, one of the main things was that inner child work. And I had acknowledged that there were things in my childhood that had hurt me and molded me, but I hadn't acknowledged her, and I hadn't given her the love that she needed. And once I was able to do that, once I was able to see her and see that she had been so lonely, and that she had needed friendship so badly, and needed so much in the way of being accepted just for herself, I realized that my current hurts, my current pains, my current responses were because I hadn't stopped to give her the love that she had needed, and she was still responding. And I could then say, oh, okay, that is like 7-year-old me, and she's so sad, and I can give her a hug and say, it's okay, that person did not do that to hurt you. That was not the point to that. And my relationships, in being able to do that from my relationship to my husband, to my relationship with my mom, with my father, and really importantly, with my best friend, who also, she found Louise long before me. She was so excited for me to get into this work. Just were able to grow exponentially because I could understand them for them and understand that my responses often came from ego, and I could step back and really think about my response before I just went with it. And that's been my biggest saving grace in knowing all of this.
Great, wonderful. Well, and I'll just share that I actually grew up with a lot of positive role models in terms of relationships. My parents overall had a fairly good relationship. Didn't work out much later in their lives, but my brothers and I had good relationships with each other. We're best friends now. So I did have a lot of them, but my mother and I didn't get along very well for many, many years. And I finally realized that it was because she was very overprotective, because I'd been in the hospital when I was 4 years old and almost died. And once I realized that that was what motivated her behavior for much of my life, and got to that point exactly what Vanessa was saying, that I learned to just love and accept her just the way she was, and didn't want her to be the mother I thought she should be. You know, in Louise's work, we talk a lot about letting go of shoulds and realizing there are coulds. And once I got to that point, my mother and I had a wonderful relationship the last 8 years of her life. So I was so grateful for Louise's work to bring me to that point. And I'm not sure my mother ever understood why the relationship changed so much, but it did. And it was really good for both of us. Okay. Now, we are getting a couple of questions, and we'll go to those in just a minute, but I want to bring up one other question that we haven't really talked about. We haven't really talked about the F word yet, and the F word is forgiveness. So what role did forgiveness play in some of your relationships changing? Who would like to answer that one? Okay, Vanessa.
So my son's father and I, we've been in each other's life for 15 years, and it was a lot of back and forth. And it's been a year now that we've been back together, and it's been a complete transformation. And it was because I realized that I had to forgive him. I kept replaying the things that happened in the very beginning over and over. And I was arguing with him constantly in my mind. And even though I was calm, cool, and collected in front of him, in my mind, I'm like bashing him and like, how could you have done this to me? Da, 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 like I didn't deserve it. And, you know, people feed off your energy. You don't have to sometimes say anything. They know how you're feeling. You know, you could just not like someone and pretend to like them, and they'll know. And so when I started just realizing, okay, he was doing the best that he can with the knowledge and awareness that he knew, I forgive him, I forgive myself, because I was doing the best that I can. And I literally, like, there'd be times where I'd lay in bed and I'd do affirmations to just forget about these memories. And as I started forgetting, we just became closer again. And, you know, that like wall of resentment was like, it just kind of fade away, because I had a block in me that would not allow him to get close to me because I was still pissed off at him. And although, you know, we were trying, I wasn't fully trying, because I felt, you know, I learned with this work that every time I'm replaying what he did to me, and every time I'm making myself the victim, I'm tearing him down. And while I might not be saying the words, he could feel that energy, and I was repelling him, you know. So it didn't matter if on the outside I was playing nice, in my mind, I wasn't forgiving him. I still felt righteous in my being mad because he messed up, but it wasn't getting me what I wanted. You know, I still loved him. I still wanted to be with him. So what was the point of holding on to all that anger if not to just keep pushing him away?
Great. And you're bringing out a great point, because it's not just forgiveness of someone else, it's forgiveness of ourselves for the way we behave, because we weren't as conscious and aware as we could be. Yeah. Anyone else want to talk about forgiveness in a relationship?
So I want to talk about with my mom, and like I mentioned in the beginning, we never had a relationship because my mom sent me as 8 months to live with my grandmother on another island called Curacao. So I spent years there, and then when I returned back to St. Maarten, I didn't speak the language, which was English. There was no mother-daughter bond, and that spent like really the years and all up into my teenage. And whenever something would happen, she would send me off. She would send me back to Curacao or send me to Trinidad, send me wherever she could send me, and or take me out of school, because that was her way of, she didn't know any better, right? So, but I walked around with a lot of resentment for her. And it was after doing all the work, the forgiveness. And when Louise said, when you look at your mom, she too was a child. She too was probably also a victim, or she too did not receive that love. So once I got that understanding, I was able to accept her, and I was able to release her, and I was able to adjust my programming by reparenting myself and allowing my heart to be free from all that pain and hurt. And from the moment I've done that, our relationship changed. And it was 2 years after doing the work. And I took her on the first trip ever. We had a first family trip with my sister, my father, my mother, not knowing that that was going to be also our last trip. Because after we came back from the trip, 30 days later, she died of cancer, which I didn't know. So, but when she was dying and I was in the hospital with her, I remember seeing myself standing at the foot of the bed. And I never understood why, because my sister was more by the face, but I think I was holding the space. And I was okay because I've forgiven her. I didn't ask the question, why did you do this? Why? Because it didn't matter anymore, because I had let it go. And I felt 20 kilos lighter, to be honest, just that releasing of forgiveness. And going through that, anyone else that comes through your life and something happens to you, it's so easy to forgive them because, if I can forgive my own mother, I can forgive anyone else, and including my own self,
And that's beautiful. And that certainly is another focus of Louise's work, is the forgiveness work, because when we're holding back on something, it's the resentment that's building up in us that is hurting us. So it's not about condoning the behavior of the other person, as you're saying, but it's about just letting it go and forgiving them. So yeah, that's beautiful. Beautiful. We do have a question on here from Hiva. She says, how do you start trusting the same person if he's done this many times? How do you start trusting? Who'd like to answer that one? Catherine, thank you.
Yes. So I believe that a lot of times it has to do with trusting ourselves and our intuition. And sometimes somebody is displaying a behavior, and especially if they repeatedly do it, that creates this lack of trust. Totally understandable. And at the same time, have we spoken up the way that we need to communicate in a healthy, respectful way? This is not okay with me. This is what I need in this relationship for me to feel safe, et cetera, et cetera. And if they keep on doing it, then it's ultimately up to us to trust ourselves to make a decision to either not be in that relationship anymore, or request, let's go to counseling and get help with this. Because if someone keeps on doing the same behavior and you've told them that it's not okay, then it becomes a point of we're allowing that into our lives. And it's hard to let go of people for sure sometimes, but it is a choice. And so this can go very, very deep. It's not as easy as a 30-second answer, but I think a lot of it has to do with being able to trust our own intuition on what to say and what to accept or not accept.
Beautiful. And also, actually, after listening to you earlier, Hiva says that, Louise's philosophy is the only person we can work on ourselves. And she listened to you, and finding the patterns and working on those are a good place to start. And that's absolutely true. But I want to just take that one step further from what you were saying, Catherine, and that is that, we don't accept abuse mentally, emotionally, and physically. And so it's not a question of trying to work on yourself at that point. If you are emotionally really being abused or in danger physically, you certainly want to get help to leave the relationship. So there's some delicate places in there. You know, it certainly is, let's work on ourselves and figure out what those patterns are in ourselves that we need to transform. And as you've already heard, that often transforms the relationship, but it doesn't always. And so sometimes it's about really speaking your truth, communicating, as Catherine was saying, with the person so that you're able to ask for what it is that you need and then making a decision about going forward. So that's a really important point about setting boundaries. You know, we do have boundaries to set as well. Okay. All right. Okay, if you've got another question, please put a question up on the board for us. And I've got a couple of more questions for our panelists that I will ask. And we've already talked about the inner child. So I had one question about, was there one technique? Vanessa shared with you the seminal idea for her that was so important, and a few others. But how about the inner child work? Christy really talked about that as well. And recognizing that child that was hurt and learned all these beliefs growing up that need to be changed, right? So who would like to talk about their inner child and really getting in touch with that child and loving and approving of her?
I'll mention that.
Sandra.
So, and that piggybacks right on what we were just having the discussion about too, because as I was listening to the discussion and I think about myself, I have come to a place where I'm able to embrace my inner child. And yet I was a very scared little girl. There was a lot of fear in my house. I was very, very scared. And that still translates into today, because one of my biggest fears is I'm going to get in trouble. And so I operate from that. I don't want to get in trouble. I don't want to do anything wrong. I want to make sure I don't make mistakes. And so my work with my inner child has really been to acknowledge her. There's a really wonderful, and it goes along with forgiveness again, there's a really wonderful audio by Louise Hay on the inner child and forgiveness. And in it, you take a journey where you look at all these stages of your life. And that for me is such a profound experience, because when I look back at all the different stages in my life, I initially worked with my tiny little girl, and then there was a lot of forgiveness to go to my teenage self, because during my teenage years, I acted out a lot and did some things that I'm not proud of. However, I was always doing the best I could. And so the inner child work is really significant, because we did learn so much as that innocent little child trying to do our best in a world that we're trying to make sense of. And so I do highly recommend that audio that you can also find on YouTube to take you through the inner child journey and to make peace with your inner child.
Thank you. Yeah, because there's a dual one. It's forgiveness and the inner child. Okay. And a question has come up for Shirley, and that is, how do you begin to forgive yourself? I've tried, but can't seem to let go of the mistakes I've made in relationship with my partner. So how do you begin to forgive yourself?
Again, it stems from, and I believe Vanessa also said it, is that you're doing the best you can. You're doing the best you can with the understanding that you had at that moment in time. And so when you understand that and you can accept that, you're starting to accept yourself, because it's not that you need to change. It's just that you need to start accepting, okay, this is what I did. Okay, this is what I could do. You know, and is that could, it's now no longer the should, what we spoke about. And once I start to understand that, okay, I did the best with the knowledge that I had. Now I know better, now I do better. And when I do that, I can start healing, and the choice is to heal, right? So there's no other choice. If the only choice was to stay stuck. And so for me, I made that decision was to heal, and healing, and it's forgiving and releasing. And then once I start with myself, I can start forgiving others as well, because it becomes also very easy. Yeah.
And the process can be that you may need to forgive the same person over and over and over again, if it's somebody on the outside, and yourself. I said that I had pretty good relationships growing up. My grandmother was my father's mom, was actually the one that was pretty tough on me. I had the most difficult relationship with her. She made it very clear that girls were not worth anything, boys were important. And I had two brothers. So my brothers got to be very important in her eyes, and I didn't. And so I struggle with that, kind of like what you were saying, Sandra, trying to be good enough, that she would like me as I was growing up. And she unfortunately died when I was about 12. We moved to a new place and she was very ill for a while. And I remember feeling somewhat guilty that I had been so angry with her. And so there was a lot of forgiveness that I did, not only with her for her behavior, knowing that she was doing the best she could, but still doing that forgiveness, but also forgiving myself, even as a child, for the ways that I then responded back to her. And, moving through that actually opened up a whole new world for me in terms of feeling confident in myself and not feeling like, oh, I've got this, older woman who hates me to try and please all the time. So, we're back to some of the patterns that show up in that child that are really important to be working on and try and being able to, just love that child and then love your behavior as well in the way that was. There's another question on here, but I want to say just before we get to that we're focusing a lot on the parents and those relationships, but we also can look at in a broader sense, our coworkers, our friends, and even some casual kinds of relationships. And those patterns play out again. And so sometimes when I've been working with someone who's having a difficulty with someone at work, I will say, who does that person remind you of? And there have been some great revelations. Oh my God, she's just like my sister who I can't stand, or she's just like this other friend that I've had problems with. And so, it gets back to us doing a little more inner work to try and understand what is my reaction to it. And Vanessa, I really liked what you said. It's like when I get triggered, what's going on in me that I need to do some more healing work? And if they're getting upset and I'm not getting triggered, okay, that's their stuff. And so that's a really good way of kind of evaluating what is going on. So we have another question. How can I trust myself again in this year, 2020? I've been retracting myself, being less sociable. Don't feel confident in knowing people, worried about it, because I think the best way to be is with someone and with people. Okay, learning to trust yourself. Well, in 2020, we all have a little bit of a challenge, though, in terms of social things, don't we? I mean, we're just not able to get out and about depending on what country you're in and things like that. So learning to trust yourself again. Who would like to answer that one? Anna. Okay, and then we've got a good one on here. Anna, we'll start there.
Well, trusting yourself again, basically, it's choosing love over fear, especially in this year 2020 when we fear for ourselves, for our loved ones. Getting as much as social contact via Skype or Zoom or Viber, whatever you use, WhatsApp, talking to your friends, really choosing to have fun versus living in fear. And then a little exercise maybe that can help you start with that is list all the things that you love to do, that you are excited about to do, or list all the good things, all the things that you're good at. What are the super positive things about yourself? Just to start seeing a picture of yourself of that person that you forget about. So that's pretty much, I think, what I had in mind.
Vanessa.
I was going to say affirmations, right? Because we talk about forgiveness and we talk about trust, and saying, oh, I forgive such and such one time is not going to do it for you. You have to say it over yourself. I forgive this person. I forgive that. I trust myself. I trust myself to make the right choices. And the best time to do that is at night when you're going to sleep. Most people will meditate, and I fall asleep to all my favorite affirmations. Tomorrow's going to be a great day. Thank you for my blessings. I'm, beautiful. I'm positive. I'm worthy. I'm enough. And really just kind of like saying it over and over and over and over again until it becomes your reality, because changing the subconscious mind is not an easy matter, right? And along with the inner child work and everything else, when you say like, how do you do something to start, I would just say, find the affirmation that it is, you know, whether you need more trust, forgiveness, or strength, and just keep repeating that to yourself until it becomes your truth.
Mm-hmm. Great. And one of the phrases that Louise uses in affirmations, if it seems tough to get there initially, I am willing. You know, I am willing to forgive. I'm willing to trust myself. I'm willing to. And I remember one course, a woman said, okay, I'm willing to be willing to be willing to be willing to forgive this person. And we said, okay, great. That's a great start. You know, let's go there. And so sometimes adding that I am willing makes it a little easier to make that first step. Catherine, you wanted to share something too.
And piggybacking on what's already been said, if we don't trust ourselves, realistically, we've made a choice that wasn't good for us. And so we're kind of beating ourselves up about it. So absolutely, we need to forgive ourselves, recognize that we were doing the best that we could at that time. And then what can we do to build that trust when somebody else has broken our trust and they say, what can I do to build that trust with you again? We can usually say, okay, here's what I need you to do. I need you to be committed to showing up. I need you to follow through on what you say you're going to do. So create that agreement with yourself. What can I do to trust myself again? And then stay committed to it. One of the greatest things we can do for ourselves in terms of trust is when we say we're going to do something, we do it, no matter how small it is. I'm going to exercise later on today. Oh, never mind. I don't have time. I'm going to get distracted. No, exercise, even if it's for 5 minutes, because then you follow through on what you've committed to yourself that you're going to do, and you start to build that trust. So it can start with small steps, but that's what I would add to that.
Yeah. And Mara's sharing, when I use the affirmation, everyone around me loves and helps me. It changes the way I feel about my coworkers and the way that they treat me. Yes, because have any of you ever had an issue with a coworker?
Oh, I have a great story, actually.
Okay.
Can I share?
Here, please do.
Okay, so years ago, I moved from Chicago to Maryland, and I haven't had a job. So I applied to all these places, and finally, someone hired me at a store to work as a seasonal for around the Christmas time for 2 months. And then after that, it was 15 of us who worked there as seasonals, and they were going to hire 2 people to stay. But then again, there was an assistant manager that I just couldn't stand. And this was the same year, actually, when I finished my teacher training with Louise. So a couple of months after that. So it was a great opportunity for me to practice. And then I would go and I would just look if I'm in the same shift with her, and I would just avoid her. And it was like both ways. We just couldn't stand each other. Or that's what I felt. So once the 2 months were over, I had an interview with a manager. And she just emailed me the night before. We're just going to hire 2 people. You're going to have an interview tomorrow with Allison. And Allison was assistant manager. And I was like, oh my God, I better don't go. Like, I'm not going to get the job. Of course, it's her. Why of all the people I have to have the interview with assistant manager when everyone is having an interview with a manager? So I went to bed that night and I said, you know what? I should know better. I know Louise Hay's work. I know affirmations. I call myself Queen of Affirmations because I just love them. And then I kept repeating my affirmations all night, that I have a great relationship with Allison, that she sees the value in me, and that they are happy to have me in the team with them. And I would just repeat and repeat. I woke up at 5 o'clock in the morning, went to the store. It was like 45 minutes commute. I would just do the affirmations, and then I sang them. I was just, oh, I feel confident. I love my affirmations. I went over there, we sat together, and she just said, you know what? I don't know anything about you. Tell me something about yourself. I had no idea what I said. I think I talked for like 10 minutes. I just remember at the end, she was crying and hugging me. And she's like, I'm so happy to have you with us. You're staying in my team. And I was like, okay, yay. So it was just less than 24 hours of shifting really my mind. Like, why? I love that person. Why wouldn't I? It's just that how we, through our thoughts, we actually change our feelings towards someone, and then the relationship changes.
Mm-hmm.
So it was I thought it was a great example.
Good, thank you. That's great. Yeah. Anybody else want to share something about changing a coworker relationship? Okay. Okay, I'll share one. And I had a boss that I was working for that actually was not a very good boss. And it turned out that he was not only into drugs, but into alcohol as well. And he would leave like for 3 hours during the day, but then expect me to pick up all of his work. And I did do some, I hadn't ever had a relationship like that before. So I really wasn't able to find a pattern. I was working with Louise's philosophy at the time, but I also knew that I had to, forgive him, understand that he was having a problem. But I also went to my boss his boss. And I went to his boss and I said, you may not be aware of the problem that's going on here, but he clearly is overusing alcohol. I think he's into drugs as well. I'm not happy about doing his extra work. And I would like you to do an intervention, possibly, do something to help him because he really needed help. And so that boss went to him and worked with him. Ultimately, he did leave. But in the meantime, after I got past all my anger and everything, we did have a better relationship. He was able to do more of the work he was supposed to do. So it helped. But otherwise, I really had to set a boundary in that particular situation because it was time for him to get his act together and not hurt the company that we were working for. So it wasn't as positive as an ending as I would have liked, but it also was a completion that it was really important. And I'm just sharing that one with you about, again, setting a boundary. I didn't need to keep working for someone who was an addict and also having me do more of his work. That just wasn't going to work for me in the long term. And I don't think it would work for anyone else. But that was one example with a coworker. There's also another point that I thought of while we were talking about a few of these things, and that is what you resist persists. You've all heard that term. We've heard it way before Louise used that. What you resist persists. And so when you're doing things like Vanessa was talking about, making stuff up in her mind that was going over the past, you're still going to get, poor behavior from the other person because they're feeling that vibe. You're actually, you're very right about that. And in my first marriage, we had an agreement about splitting up the household work. And my husband was not doing that. Now, I know I've heard a lot of women complain about this particular thing. It's often difficult to get those boundaries set, isn't it? I'm seeing a lot of nodding and smiling and laughing and everything. And, as I was working with Louise's philosophy, I suddenly realized, every time I'm angry about him not doing what he's supposed to be doing, I am strengthening and persisting in my response. And so I changed my response, not saying anything to him. And what do you know? It was a miracle. He started doing his work without me even asking. So it was such a revelation to me about how we actually energetically contribute to the behavior with the other person, even when you're not saying anything. And he seemed to magically change his behavior. So that's something else I will offer to, the people who are on our call and are going to be listening later is what are you resisting? And that is going to persist as long as you keep resisting. Okay. So I have one more question before we go into our affirmations that we're going to share with everybody. And that is, all of you have attended the Heal Your Life training, the 1 week initial workshop leader training, and then the coach training later. But in the initial week, did you have some revelations about relationships? You've already shared about just in general working with Louise's work, but at the week itself with some of the release exercises that we do and awareness exercises, did you have an awareness during that week that was really important? Because that week is a beautiful combination of the personal growth and the professional training for leading workshops. So it's quite a unique combination. Okay. Any revelations that you would like to share from that week? Yes, Catherine.
Like this could go on for 5 hours, really.
Okay.
So many revelations that week, but I think, gosh, so many. It's hard to say which one was the biggest, but I'd say one of the biggest was learning how to express your negative emotions in a healthy way. Learning that it's okay to be angry. There's nothing wrong with being angry. and it's okay to learn how to express it in a healthy way. That was huge. And I think it's really awkward for a lot of people to express anger way when they don't know how.
Yeah.
Oh, and then of course that leads to more forgiveness as well. When you're able to release all that anger and resentment, you can forgive much easier and let that love in. So, I mean, I could go on with so many affirmations that
I've got
week,
one.
but that was one of the biggest. Yeah.
Yeah. Sandra.
So one for me is we've spent a considerable amount of time talking about relationships with others. And I know for myself, I grew up with, I can be a very critical person and I can be a blamer. And that's because it came with my family of origin. And so a big revelation for me was that at the center of my world, I'm at the center of it. And all of these people around me are extensions of myself. And so a big thing for me was personal responsibility, was understanding that, yes, I developed these things because of my surroundings. And now I'm responsible for, doing something with it and about it. That blame keeps me stuck and responsibility moves me forward.
Right. Yes, absolutely. That responsibility is so important. That's a beautiful concept. Absolutely. Thank you. So we have another, yes, Christy.
So we have another question. It's how can you tell if you're being triggered by a longly held fear or by an intuitive sense? And I thought that I could actually answer to you, Patricia, and talk to that question. One of the biggest things that was a revelation to me when I was at the training was the shoulds and coulds. And we really look at that at the training for ourselves, right? We look at our shoulds and our coulds for ourselves. And when I just cried. I cried when I realized how much my shoulds were affecting my life. And then I realized how much I was shoulding on others. Really thinking they should be doing this, they should be doing that. If they want to make me feel loved, if they want to make me feel cared for, safe, all of this is what they should be doing. And it goes back to what Sandra said too about realizing that we are the center of our own universe, and that's true for all those other people. And I wasn't thinking they could do this, or I wasn't even thinking about how much I was expecting from these people to show me their love. And once I could stop and see the difference between my shoulds, my need for people to respond lovingly to me in a way that I expected because I was giving that back to them, I was able to find trust in myself for when things were really and truly not right and somebody wasn't treating me correctly, versus when it was maybe my ego, my inner child, my shoulds, whatever was going on that was creating that expectation. And so that's, I think, where when you get to know yourself, you get to know what's going on inside, then you can start to have that sense of, okay, I'm being triggered here by a longly held fear, by a longly held need. Or no, truly, this is not a correct way to behave. And I need to figure out where I want to go in this relationship.
Great. Yeah. And isn't it true along with that, Christy, that, and for everyone else, that we often, before this awareness that we had with Louise's work, expect other people, not just our partners, but other people to mind read us and know what we want. And then we get annoyed and upset because they're not reading our minds and we haven't said it, we haven't communicated. And, there's some NLP work about the differences that people have in relationships and how love is shown. For some, it's saying it, for some, it's giving flowers, and we need to be aware of our own needs. And that's a beautiful thing to bring out with the shoulds about other people. Yeah. Thank you so much about that. Yeah. And there's one more I want to, that's a really, bigger than we can completely do for this particular program, but where this woman is saying that she doesn't want a divorce, but it seems like her husband's looking for another woman every once in a while. What does that mean? What could you do? Well, there could be some patterns in him that are finding that, having that need and to act out in that way. That's a pretty more complicated question than we can really answer, I think, on this. But you had earlier to start working on patterns within yourself and possibly learn more about his childhood and the kinds of things that were going on with him as a child that may be prompting that kind of behavior. But again, that's something for you to decide in terms of what's the boundary that you want to set, and the forgiveness work that you could do with him as well along those lines, and understand that there's some deep need within him that you don't understand at this point. But it's something that you might want to follow up with one of our coaches, because they are available. I will be putting in their contact information, a link to the Heal Your Life Workshops website, in the replay email that I'll be sending out. So you could certainly feel free to contact one of them. And we have a lot of coaches worldwide. You can search for the coaches on healyourlifeworkshops.com and get some help. And it's very often a good idea to do that, especially if you're new to Louise's work. We've been with these concepts for years with all the people that are on this webinar now. And so we've applied those things to our lives, very strongly, but it's taken a while. None of us had like an overnight revelation or a sudden turnaround in just reading the book or coming to the week-long training. It's a process, and we're always working on ourselves. In fact, even Louise at 80 years old, she was on a YouTube video where she's working on some issues around her childhood, which was really a rough one. And so we're constantly in that process of understanding ourselves, getting more awareness, and thus loving ourselves more so we can love others more. So I want to ask each of our panelists to end with a particular affirmation that has really been helpful for them. And again, these will be going out in the email that I'm going to be sending out. So if you don't catch them all, it's okay. You'll be able to get them in the email that goes out. So Sandra, would you like to start with what your favorite affirmation is for relationships or any of this work?
I give out love and joy and find it wherever I turn.
I love this. Let's all do that. I give out love and joy
and find it wherever I turn.
Beautiful. Okay, thank you. Shirley.
I was muted. So I have actually just two. One is always I'm willing to forgive. And the other one is basically, and I just wrote it down very big, I treat myself with unconditional love.
Beautiful. Okay.
I treat myself with unconditional love. So.
Okay, Anna.
Well, mine is I welcome harmony and love in all of my relationships.
Beautiful. Okay, Christy.
Mine is I love and accept myself so I can fully love and accept others.
Okay, Vanessa.
Mine is I love everyone and everyone loves me.
Beautiful. Catherine.
That's a good one. This one's directly from Louise's book. I love myself, therefore I behave and think in a loving way to all people, for I know that which I give out returns to me multiplied.
Beautiful. And mine is I love and accept myself exactly as I am, and I share that love and acceptance with everyone that I meet. So there you have some affirmations that you can use. And again, those will be in our email that goes out. I want to thank all our panelists. You're doing a great job. And you've shared a lot of really important concepts for all the people that are on the webinar and that will listen to this later. We have one other thing about doing the coach training online, and I'll just say really briefly, the workshop leader training is the initial, 1 week program that is very in-depth emotionally. And then the coach training is the follow-up. And at this point, we are doing them all in person because the learning, quite honestly, is so much deeper and so much more lasting in person. And I know a lot's been done online, and these days we do have some short workshops that people are doing online, which is great. But we want to keep the integrity of the work. And it's really the integrity of the work and the depth of learning, because the more that you learn about yourself, in these programs, the more you can help others. So we will continue doing things in person. So again, I want to thank all the panelists and thank everyone who came on the call live, and those of you who are listening afterwards. We bless you, and we absolutely affirm with you for harmonious relationships now and ongoing. And so it is. We love you. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Okay.